Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Talking with T. I'm your host, Tatarian, and today I'll be doing something a bit different than what you're used to. Lately, I've been receiving a ton of requests on answering viewer questions. So the other day, I posted on X, if you could ask your favorite player anything, what would it be? Now, I might not be your favorite player, but I'll do my best in answering some of the questions that I received, and hopefully it resonates with most of the listeners on this episode. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Let's get right into it. The first question that I received was from at NVGhost85. And he asks, why does the gap between intermediate and pro players feel so vast? I've written a couple of bullet points here, but I want to start off by highlighting that pro players have a lot more discipline than the average player or the player that's just playing for fun. What I mean by discipline is they're willing to sit in the lab for countless hours dissecting every aspect of the game, matchups, and where they can improve as a player. And they spend a ton of hours on theory fighting, whether it's by themselves, as you've seen Angry Bird mention in a previous episode where he even theory fights inside the gym, or if it's with other pro players as well. The first thing would be that they have more discipline. The second reason why the gap between pro players and average players are so vast is because pro players tend to have more self-confidence. What I mean by self-confidence is they have a lot of confidence when it comes to their decision making. They feel like their read is on point. So when you have that sort of confidence in your decision making, you don't allow time for hesitation. You don't hesitate as much when it comes to committing to an action. Now, that could be a double-edged sword, but the pro player knows how to control when to commit, when to trust his decision making, and when not to. So the self-confidence not only comes from the decision making, but the self-confidence also comes from just naturally being more self-confident. What I mean by this is a man that is very confident in himself, someone that isn't as insecure as most, someone who isn't afraid of taking a risk in life, someone who truly believes in themselves. I think having that sort of confidence in your mind, a Mamba mentality, also separates pro players from the average. And what a lot of people fail to understand is the importance of the self-confidence and the mental state of the player when they're competing. The third thing I wrote down is faster adaptation. The pro player has studied the interactions so much, understands the interactions so much, that if you show him something, he's able to adapt to it at a faster pace than the average player. He can recognize the patterns at a faster rate. He can solve the puzzle at a faster rate. If you're a listener and you're good at puzzle solving, then you might be a very good fighting game player. And if you're really good at puzzle solving, but you're not a good fighting game player, that might be because you just haven't studied the game enough, and or you lack in the execution of the inputs and the actions that you have to do. But if you are really good at solving puzzles and deciphering codes, then I have good news for you. You would be an excellent fighting game player because a lot of adaptation comes from solving the puzzle. What is my opponent doing? Which option is he going for? And which one of my options will be able to beat his option? So faster adaptation is very critical. It's even more important than having better reactions. A lot of people put weight on reactions, and reactions, I would say it's faster adaptation and reactions are the most important thing. But the faster adaptation, who can adapt to who first, that is the number one reason why you'll see players become consistent. The last thing that I wrote down is better mental composure. What I mean by better mental composure is when pressure hits, when they're under stress, they're able to take that stress, feel that pressure, and rise above it. Now, it's very critical that you pay attention to the key words here. They rise above the pressure. Not that they know how to eliminate the pressure, but they rise above it. Why this is important is because many players might fall in the rabbit hole of, why can't I get rid of my nerves? I'm sick of feeling this heartbeat. I'm sick of my hands sweating. I'm sick of choking when the pressure hits because I let the nerves get to me. What separates pro players from the average is that the pro feels the same exact nerves that you feel, but has the better composure than you do. He feels the same nerves that you feel, but his ability to attack those thoughts are better than the average player. The tools he uses to overcome those thoughts are more seasoned. What I mean is, the pro player has worked on his psyche so much more that he's able to recognize those thoughts and remain focused in the game. Better mental composure simply means that you're able to take all the pressure, all the outside chaos, and the chaos that's happening in your mind and in your heart, and be able to focus on what he needs to do. The gap feels so vast because the things that I've listed are very difficult to achieve. Developing more discipline will help you develop self-confidence. Developing self-confidence will help with better mental composure. Developing more discipline will help you develop faster adaptation. If you can be in the lab and you can think about this game, think about the scenarios, how you can overcome, that will lead you to actually apply, which ultimately leads to you recognizing those situations when you find yourself in them again because you've seen them countless times, and adapt and respond more appropriately. The self-confidence with the better mental composure, it's very difficult to do because it's not mechanical. This is spiritual warfare. The self-confidence, the mental, is the difference maker between someone dropping the game-winning combo and then dropping the ball the rest of the set, and someone dropping the game-winning combo and being able to win the rest of the set. That's why I believe the gap feels so vast between pro and average players. Thank you for the question, Envy Ghost 85. On to the second question. This is asked by @thatsawkward. How much time do you need to get a read on an opponent in tournament? Here's what I've written down. Sometimes within the first few seconds. Sometimes all I need is the first few seconds of the round in order to judge what type of player that you are, in order to make a read on what type of player that you are. Well, how can you do that, Chris? Within the first few seconds, I'm typically going to walk up in the range of your normals and see if you whiff. If you whiff, it's over. Now I know that I can out-neutral you. So every aspect of the game becomes easier when I know that I can out-neutral you. If I can out-neutral you, I can expect your jump. If I can out-neutral you, then I can expect a drive rush, or a drive impact, or a risk, and when you want to press buttons. which ultimately allows me to feel more confident and execute without having to put as much stress on my mind. Another bullet point that I've written: it depends if they do something unexpected or something you expect. For example, as I mentioned earlier, at the start of the round, I'm typically going to be walking at my opponent and testing out how strong their neutral game is, how strong their button game is. If I start the round with this in mind, a very safe approach, and I see my opponent do something unexpected, like jump, not only will I be ready for the anti-air, but that'll tell me, oh man, this guy's really willing to take the risk this early on. Okay, maybe I don't need to commit as much in neutral. Because if he's willing to take that type of risk this early on in the round, then he might be willing to take more risks in neutral. And I might find myself in a position that I don't want to be in. So it might be best to play a bit more passive against a player like this. Now, jump is an extreme example, but you'd be surprised at how many people start a round with jumping at you. Another example that's a bit less risky would be if they drive rush, or if they drive impact, or if they try to throw a fireball, or if they start swinging with big normals. These are all things that you kind of don't expect the opponent to do so early on, but it's a big tell on the type of decisions that he's making. If my opponent does something expected, for example, if I'm playing a very strong player and I expect them to battle that neutral with me, then it affirms the play style that I have to play in. And it affirms a specific type of strategy that I have created in order to cater for that type of player. Cater in my favor, obviously. Sometimes it takes longer to get a read on your opponent. Try to get in range of their normals, see if they whiff normals, test their neutral. Obviously, you can do this within the first few seconds or as the round develops to see when they're pressing buttons, if they're trying to counter poke you, if they're trying to whiff punish you, if they're being aggressive with their buttons. I've also written that sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes the rounds have to play out. The chaos needs to happen, the scrambles, the corner pressures, the very meticulous interactions. All of these things need to happen in order for me to finally get the read on the opponent. Sometimes you'll see top players lose the first match and the whole crowd erupts. But then the top player is able to make a comeback and win 2 straight because it just took them a little bit longer to make the download on your opponent. This is why players typically advocate for first to 3. It gives us more time to be able to adapt to the situations. There's so many things that you have to look out for in Street Fighter 6 or in any fighting game. And having a little bit more time to assess how powerful your opponent is beneficial. The second part of That's Awkward's question is my current idea thought process is whoever adapts to who first wins. Does this hold true at the highest level? Simply put, yes, that is correct. Whoever adapts to who first will most likely be the one that wins. And the reason why whoever adapts to who first is more likely the person to win is because the person who adapts faster has labbed the situations better than you most of the time. Again, I hate using absolutes, especially in fighting games. So you'll see me often use words like most of the times, sometimes. A lot of situations require context. So what I would do if I was you is make sure you are prepared with all of the intricacies that can happen within the round. And you'll find yourself responding to those interactions more fluidly because you'll naturally have a more confident approach to them. Thank you, that's awkward, for your question. The third question here is written by at Millie Nappy. What's the hardest wall you had to overcome as a player? What kept you from being great when you were chasing being great? I would say the hardest wall that I had to overcome as a player was a combination of things, to be honest. That wall wasn't built on a singular reason or a singular factor. There was multiple bricks in different avenues that I needed to address in order for me to climb over that wall. One of the main factors was lack of self-confidence. I truly felt like I'm not meant to beat this player. And you never want to think that way. Now, I didn't always think that way. When I was 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, I didn't think that way. I was very confident. I was very confident during those years. But something happened once I started winning and my ego started getting involved. Was that the fear of losing crept in. And with the fear of losing came these very inferior and weak thoughts of self-doubt, where you just sit next to another top player and you automatically think, he's better than me. What am I supposed to do to not lose? I want to win, but I'm afraid of losing. I'm not playing to adapt. I'm playing to not lose. That was one of the biggest hurdles for me. Another hurdle that I had was lack of discipline. Lack of discipline was a really big one because to this day, I still struggle with not being able to put the time into labbing and not putting the time that I need to when it comes to thinking about the game. My lack of discipline and work ethic to the mechanical side of the game hurt me for many years. Another wall that I had to overcome was, obviously I've mentioned ego before, but when you win, you truly start expecting yourself to win. And when you do win, you start thinking very highly of yourself. And that could lead to even more problems because you thinking highly of yourself could lead to you not practicing as much as you should. It's like the Tom Brady mentality where he always viewed himself as, what is it, the 12th round pick? 12th round, 460 something. I don't know what the exact number is, but he always viewed himself as having a chip on his shoulder and something to prove. And I feel like if you approach this competitive gaming or any sort of competition with that type of mindset, then you'll always be hungry to learn. It was bad for me to view the game thinking that I was viewing the game from a master's perspective rather than a student's perspective. You always want to view from a student perspective. There's more to learn than thinking that you're a master. Any person that thinks he's a master isn't truly a master. In fact, you'll find many masters that still view themselves as students. The way I approached on how to overcome these walls was to literally focus on each problem that I had, one by one. A lack of self-confidence. Why? Why do I feel inferior? Why do I feel weak mentally? I hated feeling weak mentally. It makes you feel sick inside. It really makes you feel sick inside. And so I started watching a lot of interviews from Kobe, Brady, Michael, a lot of the greats in so many different fields. so many different sports to get an idea of how are these champions viewing themselves, their competitions, and what does their work ethic look like. Ironically, looking into how to fix my self-confidence taught me how to have more discipline. Because all of the greats talk about the type of discipline you need to have, the practice, the work ethic in order for you to achieve greatness. Studying on how to become better mentally allowed me to be able to crack the code of discipline as well. And discipline is truly very simple. You just do it without excuses. You just do what you have to do. There is no excuses. You can't provide yourself with excuses. A lot of players I've seen fall under that category of making endless excuses. And it's because they're too afraid. They're too afraid to put that much amount of time. What if it doesn't work out? That's what they think. What if it doesn't work out and I put all this time in? Or what if I go up on stage and I lose? The crazy part is that it's as simple as thinking, what if I do? What if I do win? What if everything that I put in pays out? Because I've seen it happen to other people. Why can't it happen to me? Recognize the hurdles that you have. Recognize the things that are prohibiting you from being able to achieve the best version of yourself. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work. And it's not easy. You're going to have days where you want to quit. But it's a beautiful feeling when it pays off. Thank you, Millie Nappy, for that question. The final question that I have for you guys today is by Final Bit Boss Lynn. And he asks, what are the 3 main things you look for? The first would be neutral. The second would be offensive, defensive patterns. And the third would be to test if they know matchup specific things that I've labbed or know about. Let's look at the first one. The 3 main things that I look for. The first being neutral. As I mentioned earlier, when I start the round, I'm paying close attention to what my opponent is doing in neutral. What type of decisions he's taking in neutral. Is he going for buttons? Is he going for counter pokes, whiff punishing, jumping, special moves, drive impact, drive rush? What exactly is my opponent doing? How is he walking? Where is he leading me mentally? What type of seeds is he trying to plant in my brain? And what type of seeds can I plant in his brain? All of this is being assessed as the rounds go on. But the first 5 seconds is critical because it builds momentum. And if you can make the right read on your opponent based off of what they're showing you in neutral, then it aids in the confidence, the reads, the decision making, the adaptation, all of it. If I'm you, I would really focus on watching replays and watching the similarities amongst top players in the first 5 seconds of the replay that you watch. What I'm trying to say is, if I were to pull up 100 replays of Daigo Tokido, Mago, Bonchan, Mena, Momochi, top players that you can think of, and put them all side by side, and analyze the first 5 seconds, I bet that you would see a very similar pattern. There's, of course, anomalies, but I'd be willing to bet that that pattern would be a lot of walk forward, walk back, walk forward, walk back from both players. People think neutral is just, oh, do the walk forward, walk back. But it's so much more complicated than that. I'm getting in the range of your button. I'm seeing if you press it. And if you do press it, then the next time I'm going to get in range, walk back out of that button, and then whiff punish. It's also, I'm getting in the range of your normal. Did you press it? Oh, you did press it and I blocked. Okay. Rather than walking back, why don't I try to walk forward and see if you try to counterpoke me with something? Oh, you did? So you're pressing button into button? Okay, next time I'll get back in your range and then I'll block that button that you did, but maybe I might throw out something to counterpoke your attempt to counterpoke me. The layers go on and on. Another example, I'm going to walk in range of your normal, but I also don't want to get hit with something, so I'm going to walk back out just to be safe. Are you going to jump? Are you going to drive rush? Are you going to low forward? Are you going to walk up at me? Are you going to throw a special move? The walk forward, walk back is not only playing the button game, but it's also playing the safest way to approach neutral. Trying your best to be ready for everything that could happen in neutral, essentially. There's so many more layers that goes into it as well. But those are just few examples of what it means to walk forward, walk back. We're just trying to assess what it is that he wants to go for, so I can respond accordingly. Sometimes I might have to be the aggressor, depending on how I feel, depending on the player, if I have a read on this type of player, all of that. The next thing that I had written was offensive defensive patterns. When I knock you down, what are the defensive patterns that you go for? Do you go for teching the throw on wake up? Do you go for backdash on wake up, jump on wake up, parry on wake up, EXDP on wake up, low forward on wake up jab on wake up, jump special move on wake up? Do you take the throw on wake up? There's 9 options right there that I just listed off. What do you go for? What is the best tournament strategy in order for me to respond to those defensive options? Because if I can crack your defensive puzzle, then I'll win. What's your offensive patterns? If I'm on defense, what are you doing offensively? Are you meeting me? Okay, cool. Maybe I might try to perfect parry that. Are you throwing me? Okay, cool. I don't really have to fear much besides just taking the throw. Nobody on this planet's going to throw you 10 times in a row. Let them throw you 3-4 times. See if they do that. See if they go for the throw that many times. It'll give you a tell on the type of opponent you're playing against. Okay, maybe I might respond with a backdash next time. If in the first round I lost because I took 4 throws, all right, maybe next round I'll just do a backdash. Somewhere in the midst of your offensive sequences, I might just throw that backdash in there and then put your ass back in the corner. Now you might be thinking twice about throwing, and if you're thinking twice about throwing, maybe I'll wake up with a back throw. Or I'll wake up with a button. Are you shimmying me? Well, if you're shimmying me, maybe I might be able to wake up low forward. I'm doing all of this with the intention of taking the throw, because taking the throw will give you time to assess any major offensive decisions that your opponent will take. The last thing that I wrote here is test if they know matchup specific things that I've labbed or know about. Part of playing in that first to 2 or that first to 3 is using the allocated time to see, does my opponent know how to punish this? Does my opponent know that I can punish this? Has my opponent studied this interaction the way that I have? Has my opponent studied this scramble situation the way that I have? Is my opponent ready for something that I've cooked up that can mess with his visual? How does my opponent respond to double drive rush? How does my opponent respond to drive rush? How does my opponent respond to drive impact? This is what I mean by matchup specific things and little intricacies that could heavily, heavily change the tide of the momentum. One of the best examples would be if you are capable of perfect pairing certain sequences that you know your opponent would want to go for, because it's a trait that your opponent has shown, it's a habit that your opponent as a player has shown, but also because you know that the character itself is more likely to go for specific types of sequences. So you're ready with a perfect parry, which will crumple your opponent's mental state if they're on autopilot. This amongst many other intricacies that would take hours to be able to go into. That's going to do it for today's episode of Talking with T. I hope you guys learned a lot from this episode. I appreciate everybody that asked the questions they did. If you yourself are listening and have a question, please ask it in the comments below, or you could keep a lookout on my Twitter and see when the next time I ask the audience for questions. And I hope that this episode was able to give you the confidence and the right direction that you need in order to level up and become a better player. I appreciate you guys tuning in to today's episode of Talking with T. If today's episode helped you mentally, or you feel like gave you the right direction, please like and subscribe to the channel, and have a blessed day. Until next time, bye-bye.